What's up, YouTube Nation? And welcome to D. Holloway's Midlife Takeover, where it's never too late to pursue life on your own terms and your own time because you absolutely deserve it. All right, so let's get into this video. I know there are a lot of people out there who are interested in investing in real estate, whether it be for a retirement strategy or they just want to generate some side income or cash flow. And then you also have the ones who see the commercials on YouTube with the guy with the hot car and the hot women and all of that good stuff. And more power to you if that's what you want to pursue. But really, that's not what real estate investing is about. I know it sounds sexy to a lot of people to hear, hey, I own part of a 1,000 unit apartment complex, or I invested in the XYZ Trust, one of the largest real estate trusts, in America. But I'm here to tell you that it does not take all of that. What I want to show you in this video is how even a small portfolio of single family properties can actually perform for you should you decide to get into this rental real estate game. So buying a rental property is not as clear cut as it might seem, because you're going to actually have to buy it right, finance it right, and then you have to manage it right. It's not like you just buy the property and then money just starts flowing in. You actually need to have the other part of your financial life in order, because you kind of need that cushion in case anything kind of crazy happens with the rental property. You don't want that to affect your regular daily living. So make sure you get your financial house in order before you take on buying a rental property. With that being said, there are a lot of ways that you can benefit from rental property. And I want to get into the details of how an actual portfolio performs. And I want to show you the real live numbers behind it, the cash flow, the expenses, as well as the equity. But before we get into these details, check out this quick public service announcement. If you've been thinking about breaking out of the matrix and living life on your own terms and your own time, and you find this journey interesting, please consider subscribing to my channel, where we're going to share a ton of life lessons, financial lessons, and how it all intersects with our families and our relationships. Also, if you take something of value from this video, please like and share with your friends and your family. Now, back to the video. All right, so welcome back to the video. For context here, what I want to show you here is these are 8 properties that I own in one of my rental property portfolios. And these properties are all 3-bedroom, 2-bath. They rent between, I believe, $1,200 to probably $1,800 a month. They're all located within the 5 surrounding cities from where I live, which are all within about 25 miles. And I do not manage these properties. I just don't have the temperament to do it. I don't want to hear your sob story about not having the rent. I'd rather have someone else deal with that, or somebody complaining about something. And I'd rather just manage the manager. I know it's giving away a nice chunk of money, but it gives me a little bit more life satisfaction. So that's why I do it. So we're looking at the profit and loss statement here, and it's comprised of each one of the properties. And you can see down here each property's net income that was generated. So for Sydney Drive, you had $2,000 of net income, $4,000 for Hemlock Drive, and so forth. And, because the rents are different, these numbers are going to vary, as well as the taxes and insurance and all of the other expenses are going to be variable. So the numbers are just going to be different. Now, here on Sydney Drive, and I need to dig into this a little bit more, but I think the difference here, the reason why this number is a little bit lower is, one, this tenant is actually about $1,000 behind on their rent. They've been making it up with extra payments on their rent. I forgot what happened, but we try to work with people if they've been with us for a while and haven't been a problem tenant. But that number should probably be $1,000 higher. And this property, if you notice, the interest expense is much higher than the others. And that's because this interest rate, I believe, is like 5.25% or 5.5%. And the rest of these are either 4.25% or 4.5%. So I have a higher interest rate, larger interest expense, which is cutting into the profitability here. And That's one of the things that I noticed about this particular property and why it doesn't perform better, because it has good rent, but it's just that that higher interest rate does cut into your profits here. The other thing I want to look at here in the totals here, right? So as you can see that we brought in a total of $137,000 of net income here. And that sounds wonderful, right? But then you get into the expenses, and we'll just focus on like what I consider the big expenses. Now, insurance here, I remember maybe 3-4 years ago, it may have been 5 years ago, but these insurance costs, these policies, man, they all used to be in the $800, $900 range. The insurance costs here have exploded in Texas over the past several years, and I'm seeing that in my expenses rising. The other thing here is obviously is your interest expense. All of these houses have mortgages on them, so you have the interest expense that's part of the mortgage payment, and I have to record that. Now, what you don't see is the actual principal amount, because that is a number that actually shows up on your statement of cash flows, and it's reflected in your balance sheet. Your mortgage principal payment is not an expense. And we'll touch on that a little bit later. I don't want to get into an accounting rant or anything like that. But that principal payment, while it's money coming out of your pocket in your statement of cash flows, it is actually also building you wealth. So, and I'll show you how that's reflected when we get into talking about the equity. All right, so the other thing here I talked about was property management. A lot of people might look at this and say, hey, man, it's just 8 properties. You can manage that yourself and keep that $7,000 in your pocket. But I do not want to do that, because I prefer the satisfaction of just managing the manager. She does a good job of keeping things in order and keeping me informed. And I'd rather spend that $7,000 rather than do it myself. All right, the other thing here is the big killer, property taxes. Almost $42,000 in property taxes. And all of these have risen over the years. I mean, extraordinarily, right? I remember this particular property right here, Melissa Diane Street. This was actually the very first house I bought in my life. And it was my primary residence. And this was, I don't know, 2008, 2009 timeframe. I bought it when the market was down. And I remember the property taxes being around $3,400 annually on this property. And now they are $8,000. I mean, the city is only about population of about 40,000, but they have 4 freaking high schools, and it's reflected in my taxes going from approximately $3,500 to $8,000. Some of these properties, man, I don't understand why Hemlock has such high property taxes. I looked at the property sales in the area. I did a comparative market analysis just to make sure that, my property wasn't getting lumped into properties that were not either similar or not, that shouldn't be taxed in the same manner or have the appraised value that the other properties have. But unfortunately, all the properties in that neighborhood are getting a high appraised value. But we're going to look at it, kind of trying to challenge some of this stuff, because this number has gotten out of hand. Although in Texas, we don't have a state tax, as you can see, this is how they get us, through property taxes. And then repairs and maintenance. We actually had a low year in repairs and maintenance for this particular property. Or this particular set of properties, rather. I believe the only one was here, Wilma. I believe we had a like a French drain or some sort of drainage system installed, because this property sits like below the road. And when it rains, we were getting some flooding issues. So we had this drainage system installed that takes all of the water from the front of the house around the sides and to the back creek. So that was about $4,000, I believe. But you see that now our total expenses were $99,700, which left us with $37,000 of income after all expenses, all maintenance and repairs, all vacancy loss. Actually, this number should be about $3,000 higher because, as I mentioned over here on Sydney Drive, they're $1,000 behind. But I forgot that this person, Chapman, hasn't deposited their rent yet. So we've started the paperwork for eviction. I believe she lost a contract or something that she was working. But to cover our bases, we start the process, and we give the person an opportunity to make it up. But if not, if they don't make it up before the court date, then you got to go. So actually, this number should be about $3,000 higher, about $40,000, but unfortunately, it's not. And that is life, and that is what happens in the rental real estate game. Now, one of the benefits of this is that this money is going to be largely tax-free because of depreciation. And what happens is that the government allows you to depreciate the home, each individual home, over, I believe it's 27.5 years. And we all know that houses actually appreciate, but it's a paper loss that you get to take. So for example, let's say Yale Drive, the net income was $5,000, but let's say the portion of depreciation is $3,500. So you would subtract $3,500 for that. And on my tax return, my net income on this property would only show $1,500. So I would only be taxed on the $1,500 because of depreciation. So that's one of the great benefits is that although this is just $37,000, it's not. This is not money that you can live off or anything like that. But it's largely tax-free, and I'm generally going to be able to spend about, I would say, probably $20,000 of that money I can spend doing, other things with it, fun things with it, because I don't use this money to live off of. This is, I have income from other streams that I live off of. This is money that we use for, I've done a number of things in the past over the years with this money. I've helped pay for my daughter's college education. I've bought a car with it, and it has over the years paid for family vacations. So again, it's not money that I use to do my daily living, but it is money that I use for some of the fun things in life. And then there's a certain amount that I just like to leave in the account to carry over to the next year. Before we get into the equity part of the video, there's just a couple other things that I wanted to go back and touch on because I may have missed it. Now, all of these properties are on 30-year fixed rate mortgages. So they all have financing on them. And that's one of the other ways that you can benefit from rental property is with leverage. You're able to borrow money from banks to buy these properties and then outsource that debt to other people, tenants, to have them pay that debt for you. And you obviously can make a profit on the spread in between. And one of the other benefits is that this whole thing, with inflation, right? Well, inflation actually helps rental property and real estate in general because it forces rents up just like everything else. And the debt, however, is fixed. It doesn't change. So whether inflation pushes my rent up, to from $1,300 to $1,500, my mortgage is going to stay the same. So that's why they say that it's, I guess, real estate is a hedge against inflation, or one of the reasons rather. But I'm paying off my mortgage in cheaper dollars. So that's another benefit, is the leverage. Also, the tenant paying down the mortgage is actually building you wealth, because that loan balance comes down, creates more equity, which creates wealth for you. And one final thing here is that the reason this cash flow number is important is because it allows you to weather storms, right? So let's say the real estate market crashes, and to be totally honest, a lot of these properties were bought during a crash. But as long as the properties can pay for themselves and you don't have any other reason that you have to go and sell one of these properties, then the market crashing really doesn't affect you, because the properties can pay for themselves and you don't need to sell. So you just hold and wait, and eventually the market is going to come back, and depending on if you bought the houses in the right locations and so forth, they're going to continue to appreciate, and all will be well again. It's sort of like the stock market. If the stock market crashed and you don't have a reason to sell your stocks, there's no reason to panic and go sell them. You just hold them and weather the storm. So that cash flow number is very important, because it allows you to weather any crashes when the properties can pay for themselves and pay for themselves with the profit. Let's get into the equity portion of this video. So we're looking at the same 8 properties that are in this particular portfolio. And the first thing you have here is the original purchase price. The first house that I bought, as I mentioned, was Melissa Diane, and this was my primary residence. I believe the financing for this house when I bought it was like a 5% down or something like that. But I bought it during the downturn, and it was in move-in ready condition. So I was able to buy the house and move in, and the closing costs were covered and all of that stuff. So didn't take a lot of money out of pocket. And that's the point that I want to make, is that at this point, I don't have any of my own money tied up in any of these properties, because I was either able to buy the property, rehab it at 75% of ARV, and then get bank financing on the 75%, thus not having any of my own money tied up in the property. And obviously, I kind of learned that whole BRRRR method after buying a couple of properties the traditional route, because I believe it was Milas Lane and I'm going to say Chapman. These two I bought via the traditional method of 20% down, and both houses were in good shape, and I immediately rented them out. But we're talking, 10, 12 years ago. So I've gotten my money back out of the properties via the cash flow. So technically, I don't have any of my money tied up in these properties anymore. And I don't have any of my money tied up in the rest of these properties. So now we're going to look at the estimated market value. So that's the estimated value of the properties right now. What I did was I did a comparative market analysis, and then I backed off that market value from the comparative market analysis by about between $30,000 and $40,000, because what I wanted to do was to reflect a sort of as is condition of the property right now. I didn't want to overstate the value by not taking into account that, hey, this property is a rental property that, it had a tenant in it. And, if the tenant moved out, we're going to have to go in and do some work to it to get it to its, to a higher value. So I took the market value and discounted it by about $30,000 to $40,000. So if I went to flip one of these houses, I'm going to be flipping it at a much higher price than what's shown here. But for the purpose of giving me a number that I felt comfortable with in terms of my estimated equity, I discounted the estimated market value. And as you can see, if you totaled up all 8, the market value is 1.8 million. And now you come over here to the loan balance though. And as you can see on some of these properties, man, I have a low loan balance relative to the estimated market value. So like for Yale Drive here, the loan balance is 50,000, but the discounted market value, it's still $200,000. And the same here for Milas Lane, I have a loan balance of $43,000 and it's, $200,000, discounted market value. And obviously the property here at Melissa Diane, the value, really has increased over there on those properties. But again, the loan balance is only at $97,000, but the discounted market value is at $320,000. And you can see that tenants are paying the loan payment, which on every time they make a payment, they lower this number and they increase this equity number. So as it stands right now, my total loan balances it's only $608,000. So that leaves me with $1.2 million in estimated equity. So just right here on an 8-property rental portfolio, you're a millionaire. So it doesn't have to be something that's, super elaborate, or you don't have to have a gazillion of these properties to be a simple, I guess what they call the millionaire next door. And, the beauty of it is that this doesn't, include any sort of 401k retirement plan that you might have, or any other stock investments that you might have, or any other cash that you might have. And I also have a second portfolio, and I'm going to do a separate video on that one to show you kind of the difference in the performance. But as you can see, I'm very confident in this estimated equity number. And this number is more than likely going to continue to increase over time as long as I hold these properties. Now, I understand that this estimated equity is not money out of money that I can go to the bank, right, and pull out. I would have to either get some sort of second mortgage, or either refinance, or either sell the property to tap into this equity. But again, and that's probably a conversation around using, some of this equity to get a better return. I acknowledge that. But as of right now, I don't have to live off any of this because I am making income other places to support my daily life. So this is more of a retirement strategy for me in dealing with these rental properties. So I just want to show you that even though that cash flow number didn't, look super sexy, it's not anything that you can quit your job over and live off of. But as you can see, that just a small number of properties can really explode your wealth in a tremendous way. And this is like wealth that I personally have not had to spend a ton of time accumulating, because yes, I had to acquire the properties and, manage the rehab. I don't do any of the work myself either. And then manage the manager. But for the most part, this has grown over time by simply buying and holding. There you have it. A peek into how even a small rental property portfolio can actually perform. I'm going to do a second video where I'm going to look at the 5 additional properties that I own in a separate portfolio that are tracked separately as well. And we're going to look at how they were acquired and the performance of those, because they were purchased after the original 8. And if you have any questions, drop me a comment and I'll definitely answer that question for you. Until then, take care, be safe in these social media streets.